Larry, are you expecting this war over the dollar and attempts to weaken the dollar to get more obvious, more overt in the coming year?
I hope not. I think there's a risk of it. I think when you signal that you don't want your currency to be strong, when you trash your own currency for competitiveness, you raise the borrowing costs for every American homeowner and for every American company. And so I think it's something that operates to make the economy less competitive, less efficient, not more competitive and more efficient. As we always used to say when I was at the Treasury, no nation can devalue its way to prosperity. That's ultimately about the quality of its institutions, the hard work of its workers, the entrepreneurship of its businesses. And those are the fundamental things we should be trying to foster.
You know, meantime, on the Fed, President Trump just upping the ante in his fight with the Federal Reserve. Earlier this hour, Secretary Summers, we talked to Mark Short. He's the chief of staff for VP Mike Pence. Here's what he said about why the Fed should be cutting right now.
In our mind, the Fed should be focused on inflation, and there's not been evidence of inflation. We know that what happened throughout the 1970s, 80s, 90s was an adaptation to the Phillips curve and believing that when you began to see employment increase, that necessarily inflation would follow. So therefore, the Fed wanted to get ahead of that. We're enjoying record numbers of unemployment at 3.7%, the lowest in 50 years, but there has not been inflation that's followed that. And so we think the Fed should be focused on the inflation part.
I mean, it sounds like you agree with him ultimately, but to hear the message over and over and over again out of the White House, how do you think that won't ultimately impact decision-making?
Let me ask you, why does it mark us as a serious country for the White House chief of staff or the vice president's chief of staff, who used to be the head of White House legislative affairs, to be giving us disquisitions on monetary policy? It never occurred to me when I worked in the White House on economic policy to discourse on legislative strategy or the vice president's political strategy. This kind of thing, this idea that expertise doesn't matter, everybody talks about every subject, that you can just wish what will turn out to be true, is not the mark of a governed government governed by reason. And I think that's a very troubling thing. Yeah, I think the Fed's doing the right thing now, but I think the idea that directives for the Fed or running Fed commentary should come from the vice president's chief of staff, I think is a bizarre descent for American democracy.